Hey, in this video, I'm going to talk about float rotation and cap rotation. I'm going to show you how to calculate for those things and how I use those statistics to help me in my trades. Okay, so in the last video, I talked about how to find the market cap and the shares outstanding and the float. It was a long video and I went into detail about how to find the accurate float. So here you might see me go through some stocks and look at the float, and I might go through that fast, but you could watch the previous video if it's confusing for you how to find the float. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about float rotation. So how you calculate for that is first you have to pick a stock. So today Tops had another green day today. So you can pick a stock, and now I can go to the daily chart. On here I'll just go 6 month 1 day. So now each candle it represents a day. So today I move the line here over today, and we see that the stock, the volume traded 44 million. So in the last video I looked at the float of Tops, and we saw that after they did a reverse split, the float shrank to 2.8 million. So if we know the volume and we know the float, we'll divide the day's volume by the float to determine float rotation. So in this case, we can go, the day's volume was 44 million and the float is 2.8 million, so I can divide 44 by 2.8, and that equals 15, about almost 16. So we can say the float rotated, or the stock rotated through its float 15, almost 16 times. So float rotation represents that a stock has limited supply and it's in high demand. And so these 2 days, the stock had a limited supply and was in high demand. Remember, the float is the supply. So traders cannot buy more than 2.8 million shares. But when this volume exceeds the flow, it means that it's exchanging hands. The same shares are going back and forth. One trader buys, sells, another trader buys, sells, etc. And so the supply is limited. It's only 2.8 million, and you can think of the volume as the demand. So float is supply, and the volume is in demand. So there's like 20, you can think of it like there's 23 million people on this day wanting to buy the supply, but there is only 2.8 million worth of supply. So what's going to happen when there's a lot of float rotation? That's usually a sign that the stock can spike 50 to 100% or more in a day or two. And so in this case, since there was a lot of float rotation, these 2 days we can see that the stock went from $2 to almost $6. So it almost went up 200%. Okay? And then earlier when it had its first run, uh, I think the reverse split was somewhere around here. So on 10/4, the stock was also the float of tops was also 2.8 million. And so this stayed too. We see that, oh, the volume was almost 17 million. And so we can say that, that obviously there's a lot of float rotation here. And on the 10/5, the volume was 40 million. And today I think it was also like 40 million. Yeah. So these 2 days, it was similar price action. And then this stock just kind of spiked more. It went from like 3 to 11. But it's a similar situation. So when we have a lot of float rotation, and also when there is a small float or a low float stock, and remember anything under 10 million is considered a low float stock. So you take a low float stock and float rotation, it makes it easier or more likely that the stock can spike 50 to 100% or more in a few days, or even in one day. Okay, so this is basically what float rotation means and why you want to know if the stock is rotating through its float a lot or not. You want to have an idea, does the stock have a potential to spike a lot? Okay, so for example, if you're shorting against a stock and the stock is having especially the first green day and there's a lot of float rotation, it's probably not a good idea to short the stock, especially in the morning, because if you're looking at the volume and the volume prediction, it looks like, oh, yeah, by the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of float rotation. Then you want to think twice about shorting the first green day or betting that the stock will go down. And then that also gives you an idea too that, oh, maybe if it's coupled with big news and it's the first green day and there's a lot of float rotation, I probably want to long the stock. There's a good chance it might spike 50 to 100% or more. That doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I'm going to try to make 50 or 100% when I buy it. No, it just means there's a good chance that, uh, especially on the first green day of a low float stock that's rotating through its float a lot, that it's gonna probably favor the longs more than the short sellers. Okay, so that's float rotation, and that's why it's important. And also, another thing that I noticed with shorting, with float rotation, is that there is sometimes when a stock rotates through its float too many times, and then it'll make the potential for a short squeeze high. So I can go now and look at, there was a Trump stock or a stock that Trump hyped, DWAC. Okay, Let me get some water. Hold on. Okay. So I just want to show you on, let me see. Oh, now I'll look at the 1 year, 1 day chart. Oh, it's been more than a year now. Let me just go back 5 years. The stock hasn't been in the market or on a listed stock exchange for more than 5 years. So on this day here, on 10/21 of last year, yeah, 2021. So 10/21/21. This stock, we can see the volume was almost, I'll just approximate it to 500 million. Okay, and then on this stock, I can see now what the float was. I believe it was 25 million. But just to make a point, so I think the stock was 25 million. And then we can approximate that the volume was 500 million. So if we take 500 million and we divide it by 25, that equals 20. So I do notice that when a stock rotates through its float 20 times or more, especially on the first green day, the potential for a short squeeze is high. Now, of course, there was some big news. You can look at it later if you don't know what it was. Or, okay, I can mention it was when Trump, I think, was talking about launching Truth Media after he was banned from Twitter. So it was kind of like a way for Republicans or the Republican voice not to be censored on social media. So this is what caused the big spike. But as you can see, it went from like 12 to 52. And then the next day it gapped up huge. And so anyway, this is just to show you that it rotated. When a stock on the first screen day rotates like 20 or more times, that's too much float rotation, or the potential for a short squeeze is high. So if I'm short selling, I don't want to see a stock, especially on the first screen day, rotating through its float 20 or more times. Okay, so that's with float rotation. Now I can talk about, so those are my thoughts on float rotation. And I think you can understand now how I use float rotation in my trades. So now I'll talk about cap rotation. So cap rotation, I mean, so for example, now we can say, okay, this stock is, the market cap is about $13 million. Dollars. And so if $13 million goes into the stock, I'll say that it rotated through its cap one time. And so 13 times 2 is 26. So if $26 million went into this stock, I'll say it rotated through its cap twice. So now there are some trading softwares, I believe, that they show you the volume in dollar amounts so you can have an idea of how much dollars went into the stock in one day. But I usually just you could do a rough estimate. And so the way I do a rough estimate, I usually look at the 15-minute chart and then I try to say, like, okay, where was there, what was the average price of the stock? And today it was volatile. It went from like 350 to almost $6. Then maybe I could approximate, and this could just be a rough estimate, so I can say, okay, maybe the dollar amount was, I'll just say 4.5. So let's just say the average price today was $4.50. And so now I'll multiply that by the volume. Okay, so 4.5 times 44 equals, so I could approximate that about $200 million went into the stock in this day. Okay, so does that make sense? I took the average price. I just said, like, okay, I could say on average, looking at the consolidation on the 15-minute chart and the price range, like, okay, it went from 350 all the way up there, so we'll say 450 is the average price, and then I multiplied that by the volume, and that number is approximately 200 million. So we can say 200 million went into this stock. And so now I'll want to get the market cap value at 4.5. So right now it's showing the market cap value at the closing price, which is 3.65. And so I remember from yesterday when I looked at the shares outstanding, the shares outstanding was 3.5. Again, you can watch yesterday's video if this is getting confusing now about the market cap and how to find it. Okay, so 3.5 times, that was the shares outstanding of top, so now times 4.5. So we can say, I'll just round it off to 16. So, okay, the market cap at the average price was about 16 million. And so about 200 million went into tops. And so we take 200 divided by 16, and that equals 12.5. Okay, so it rotated through its cap about 12 to 13 times. Okay, so now I normally care more about float rotation, but now I have an idea. I can say how I can use this data now about cap rotation and the dollar amount is if I'm tracking stocks, I can say for micro cap stocks, stocks like under 20 million, maybe I can say between stocks with a market cap between 10 to 20 million market cap, it looks like the max dollar amount that goes into that stock is 200 million. And, maybe it might rotate through its cap about 12 to 13 times. So the next time I'm looking at a stock with a similar cap, a market cap, maybe between 10 to 20 million, I can now have this number in mind. I can use tops as a reference. And so I can say, okay, the next time about $200 million goes into a micro cap stock, it's probably a sign that it's topping, that it's found its top. Okay, and then I can see like on this day it traded a similar volume, but the price was higher, so probably it even went more than 200 million went into the stock on this day. Yeah, because the price was higher. So now on this chart I can't go back to see what was the average price of this day. I can see on my computer, but on the phone app, like if I want to look at the 15-minute chart, I can't go back like 60 days or 100 days or like 60 to 90 days to see what was the average price that day when it traded that meant much volume, or on 10.5. So anyway, let's just say, just to guess here, I could say, okay, it was $8. And so 8 times 40. So 8 times 40 equals 300. About approximately, so I can say approximately 300 million volume went into this stock this day. So we notice the pattern that normally we can say for now, if we're tracking data using tops as an example and using the cap rotation and the max dollar amount, we can say, okay, if the stock, rotates maybe through its cap like 10 times and if 200 to 300 million goes into stock, of a microcap stock between 10 to 20 million, we can have an idea that that's a sign that it's topping. Okay, because the next day the volume was lower, the other days, and the price was lower. So we notice these other days, we can say 300 million did not go into the stock these other days. So 300, after 300 million goes into the stock, a microcap stock, it looks like that's the top. And then in this case, it was like 200 million. So that's how I use cap rotation in my stock trading. Okay, so now I could just go briefly. I want to mention in the other video, in the previous video, when I was talking about how to find the flow, I just so happened to not have a good stock example. I had ones that it was kind of tricky to find the flow, and normally after the 10Q file is issued in the SEC file, if there is a reverse split, it means the float will shrink, and then that can kind of be tricky if you watch the other video to determine the float. And then yesterday I was also looking at this stock, and I noticed that when I looked at the most recent 10Q, the float was showing that it was about 14 million. But then when I looked on the float on Yahoo Finance, it was showing that it was 77 million. And I mentioned, oh, they probably did an offering. So after the most recent quarterly or financial statement, whatever that number shows on the stock or on the SEC filing, if Yahoo Finance is showing that the floats seem to suddenly increase, that what causes a float to increase is when they do an offering or a secondary offering. I can talk about that maybe in a future video. Okay, and so I mentioned that, oh, they must have did an offering. And so I just wanted to show you that in this one, they did do an offering. So here on November 3, they did an offering here, and normally the offering it will show in the SEC filing, but this one it seemed they were delayed, so sometimes companies, like each quarter, they should have a 10Q file or a quarterly report showing in the SEC filing. So in this one, for this company, I think they were a little behind. So in this case, actually, Yahoo Finance was keeping up with them more. And so here I just wanted to show you in this sentence, they did it said they issued an additional 68 million shares. And so that's why the number went up. So now for this flow, I would add 68 million to the number that I saw in the most recent 10Q file that was showing. So yesterday I was saying, oh, I'll trust it's 14 million volume for this stock and not 77 million, but now I'll say it's actually 14 million plus 68 million, which is I'm bad at my math, like 82. So I'll say the float is like 82, so okay, Yahoo Finance had it more right in that case. But normally, I can show you now an example of a stock. Normally, that if it's an regular American stock like this stock, PAFO, if you go to key statistics and you look at the flow on Yahoo Finance, it'll show some number. This number it's showing it's about 4 million the float. And then if you look at the most recent 10Q file, it'll probably show a different number. And then here on PAFO, we can see on this stock, they didn't have a reverse split or an offering after their 10Q file. So the number, like here it's easy to find. Okay, this is the most recent 10Q. And you can see with this one, they're actually keeping up because if you recall the other stock, CAL, from yesterday's video, the last 10Q file I saw filed, it was like on the 5th of this year. But as you can see, like each quarter, they should be filing a 10Q. There's a 10Q here on the 16th, on the 8th, and then on the 11th of this year. So here, the most recent 10Q says as of November 14, 2022, there was 7.4 million. So I could round it off to 7.5 million actually. So the flow is 7.5 million, the flow or common stock. Those are the same things. Okay, and then when we said what we said, that the float should not exceed the market cap if you multiply it by the current price. So I just want to show you in this case that it doesn't. So right now the market cap at 6.54 is 49. And so if I take 7.5 times, what was the closing price? 6.54 equals 49. Okay, so yeah, in this case, I'll say that because this one actually had a most recent 10Q, they kept up with their quarterly reports, and the float doesn't exceed the market cap, and there isn't a huge difference like with the other one from 14 million all the way to 77 million. I go, what? There must have been an offering, and there was. And so in this one, there isn't that drastic of a difference. So this one, though, is more up to date. And so normally that's what I find with Yahoo Finance. When I look at the most recent 10Q, the flow according to that versus the flow according to Yahoo Finance, normally Yahoo Finance seems to kind of be a little outdated, and this one seems to be more up to date. Okay, and again, if that last part was confusing, you can watch my previous video about how to find the accurate float of a stock. So that's it in this video, and in the next video I can talk about different time frames and maybe the best time of day to trade stocks.